Good morning. Welcome to AEI. My name's Brent Terrell, and I lead research here at AEI on vocation, career, and work. And we have the pleasure today of hearing or taking part in a conversation with Dr. Joseph Aoun, president of Northeastern University.
Ever since Arnold Schwarzenegger crashed into our multiplexes,
Americans have been very worried about robots and what
robots are going to do to us.
I think
we're okay.
I don't think
we're looking at a robot apocalypse.
But I do think that robots are going to have a huge impact
on our lives,
including the kinds of work we do and how we do it. Across the economy and around the world, artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics,
etc. They're all eliminating jobs,
altering existing jobs,
and creating new opportunities.
The Terminator of the big screen, I don't think is coming back.
That's quite what he said.
But the machines are here to stay.
So here at AEI, like I said, I lead research on issues related to vocation, career, and work. And one of my interests is in trying to help students and workers better understand
and prepare for
the high-tech
economy of the future.
As we're all aware,
we've had decades
of
analysis, discussion, and experience
how automation
has changed the economy in terms of manufacturing and other heavy industries.
Remarkable number.
Since 1987, U.S. manufacturing output has almost doubled.
While the number of
manufacturing workers in the United States has fallen from 17 million to 12 million. That's not commonly known. We are producing vastly more stuff in the United States with far fewer people. And in general, if you look over the history of the United States, automation has raised productivity and incomes, and it is by far a net positive for our economy and for our workers.
However, it is also true
that these changes leave many without the skills they need
for jobs,
service, and information economies. So now what we're seeing is that technology is actually going to start to alter these so-called jobs in the same way that it hit manufacturing.
Computers,
artificial intelligence, robotics are altering and eliminating jobs in medicine,
legal research, accounting,
and other areas traditionally staffed by people. About a week and a half ran a piece on how automation is impacting workforce at Accenture.
It was fascinating.
And the commitment that
Accenture
has made to retraining its workforce.
This too,
in the long run, to help boost productivity and raise incomes, but it's also going to require a lot of adjustment by workers. To meet this challenge, America needs to rethink its education and training strategies, build a more flexible and adaptable workforce. Dr. Joseph Aoun, president of Northeastern University, is here to discuss his recent book, Robotics, Higher Education in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. Dr. Aoun has been a leading voice for education that integrates knowledge and skills, broader human capacities, and hands-on professional experience. He will explore the themes of this book with us, and then join me and AEI economic scholar Stan Boyer for conversation. Then we're going to turn the time over to you to ask questions and engage with Dr. Aoun. Dr. Aoun holds a PhD in linguistics and philosophy from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and I was surprised and relieved to learn that MIT offers PhDs in linguistics and philosophy. He was the Anna H. Dean's Chair in Letters, Humanities, and Sciences at the University of Southern California before he came to Northeastern. He has received many awards and recognitions. Most notable to me is that he is a French Legion in the French Legion of Honor. And how many days do you get to meet? So please join me in welcoming Dr. Joseph Aoun.
Thank you, Brent. Let me tell you something about Schwarzenegger. He was the governor when I was in Southern California, and I had to work with him a lot and imitate his accent also because he loved that. About my background at MIT has linguistics department and we were funded by the research lab of electronics. We focus on cognitive neuroscience, so that's why we survived and we flourished. Brent, thank you very much for your introduction, and for framing the discussion. And good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit, maybe for 10 to 15 minutes about robot proof. Brent and Stan afterwards, together we will have the opportunity for a dialogue. And let me start by mentioning something that you heard a lot recently. That AI is machines are going to displace jobs. They are displacing jobs. Various economists are projecting that up to 50% of the jobs that we know are going to be displaced in the foreseeable future. This is a matter where the economists like to discuss. Some of them will tell you, no, it's not 50, 40, 50, 30, 40, whatever it is. 20, whatever it is. Stan is here to tell you the truth. The second aspect, at the same time that jobs are being displaced, there are new jobs being created. And what we don't know, in the short term, we don't know whether the jobs that are being created will be enough to compensate for the other jobs. And once again, I'm going to Stan as an economist to frame it. So that's the situation. If we look at it, what do we need to do as human beings when we face this situation? Well, obviously it is the case that we need to become robot proof. And in order to become robot proof, it doesn't happen once for all. It's a journey. It's a lifelong journey. And that's what I'm going to discuss. How to become robot proof. And I'm going to assert that the mission of higher education is to help people become robot proof. And it's a lifelong journey. So let's start with the young minds, the 18 to 22 who are moving into college. I'm not going to focus on pre-K and K-12. Maybe during the discussion we can do that. But let me start the robot proof journey at the college level. How do we help people become robot proof? And essentially, what I am asserting, what we are saying is that we need people to master humanics. And what is humanics? Humanics is very simply the integration of three literacies. Namely, every learned citizen has to master and understand machines, and how to interact with machines. The tech literacy. The second literacy is the data literacy. We need to understand the sea of information generated by machines. And the third literacy is the human literacy. What is it that we humans do that machines cannot duplicate? So what are these features? These features are very simply the features that we practice on a daily basis. The ability to be innovative, the ability to be creative, the ability to be entrepreneurial, the ability to look people in the eye and understand their body language and see whether they agree with me or disagree, the ability to work in teams, the ability to be culturally agile and global, etc., etc. Those are the human attributes that for the foreseeable future, by foreseeable future in our lifetimes, machines are not going to duplicate. And here I'm looking at the young people, namely saying maybe for the next 60, 70 years, machines will not be able to duplicate that. In the long run, we'll all be dead, so I don't know what will happen. But that's where we are. So essentially start by mastering, every learned citizen should master humanics. Understand tech literacy, data literacy, and focus on what we do that machines cannot duplicate. It's easier said than done because you all know that we can study books about creativity, about entrepreneurship, about teamwork, etc., but it doesn't make us creative. It doesn't make us entrepreneurial. We have to live it. We have to practice it. And that's where experiential education comes into play. And what is experiential education? Experiential education is the integration of the classroom experience with the world experience. I'm talking about those long-term internships, co-ops, etc., that will allow the learners to test their knowledge, to refine it, to change it, to understand themselves, to understand what they are good at, to understand what others are good at, and then to start working with teams, to look at and to understand that people come at an issue from different perspectives. That's a cultural agility part, etc., etc. And then to see gaps in what, in society, in the enterprise, and say, those gaps, I can go ahead and do that. I can launch a startup, whether it's for profit or not for profit, in order to fill this gap. So essentially what I'm saying so far is, when you start your robot-proof journey, start by understanding machines and go beyond that, focus on what we humans can do that machines cannot duplicate. In order to do it in a real-world context. What I'm saying is that the world is too interesting to ignore. And experiential education will allow you to do that, to refine your knowledge, to reshape your knowledge, and move forward. But that's not enough. After you leave college, machines are not going to stop. They're going to become better, and they're going to displace more jobs, and will create more jobs, new jobs. Therefore, we have news. When I went to college, people told me, you're set for life. Well, no one is set for life anymore, because we all are becoming obsolete as we speak. Therefore, we all need to redefine ourselves, reskill ourselves, upskill ourselves. And what's interesting is that in the United States, the overwhelming majority of learners, 73% of learners, are non-traditional learners. That means that they are learners who are beyond the 18 to 22. Those are learners who need to re-educate themselves, to reskill themselves, and to upskill themselves. So who's going to do it? From this perspective, it is interesting to see that we in higher education have focused on the 18 to 22. And even our policies, and we'll have time to discuss that, are focusing on giving access to the 18 to 22. Lifelong learning in higher education has been viewed as a second-class operation that you do on the side. Yes, you make money out of it, but clearly this is not part of your core mission. We are an aging population, and beyond that, we all need lifelong learning. So if 73% of the learners are lifelong learners, and universities are not looking at lifelong learning as part of its core mission, we risk becoming like the railway industry. When they saw the onset of the airline revolution, they said, oh, it's not for me. I am in the railway business. They didn't say, we are in the transportation business. And that's the enormous opportunity for higher education. In the United States, last year, only 34% of colleges and universities filled their seats. Well, but why? Because they are concentrating on the 18 to 22, and that's fundamental, that's essential. Let me repeat it, but that's not enough. So lifelong learning is a must, is a necessity. And I'll discuss a survey that we just finished, a survey of people's attitude towards higher education. In the US, in the UK, and in Canada. Why the three countries? Because we have campuses, lifelong learning campuses there. And people's attitude differ. Because people are saying employers in the United States are expecting employers to provide that, to provide the lifelong learning, not universities. That's interesting. But let's look at it from this perspective. Employers, in fact, are providing less in terms of lifelong learning, not more. And why? Because the average tenure of an employee is less than 5 years now in the United States. In Silicon Valley, it's 2 years. So people are saying, why should I invest in that if the employees are transient? The second aspect is that it's not enough to focus on employers only. We have the gig economy. Almost a third of the workforce is involved in the gig economy, one way or another. They don't have employers. So we are at a point now where lifelong learning has to become part of the core mission of universities in order for universities to take advantage of this situation, but also to assume their mission. Our mission is to provide education. And it's not to provide education to the 18 to 22 only, but provide education for life. That's the opportunity. And then you can say, well, that's fine, let's do it. Let universities embrace lifelong learning. But in order to do that, we have to relearn how to operate. Why? Because essentially the model in higher education is that we build them and they will come. There are two types of learners. Learners who are short on experience and long on time. Those are the undergraduate learners. You can do that with them. But then you have learners like us all who are short on time and long on experience. You cannot tell them go back to college. We have to start providing on-demand, personalized, customized programs. Degrees may not be the destination. Certificates, stackable certificates that may lead you there. We have to be humble and have the employers at the table and saying, what outcomes are you looking for? We may have to embed and I'll give you specific examples during the discussion, our learning in companies, in enterprises. So universities have to relearn what to do. But the opportunity is there. So what I'm saying is very simple. In order to become robot-proof, you have to be involved in a lifelong journey of learning. It can be structured, it can be informal, but it has to be done. Because ultimately, we have to focus on what we humans can do that machines cannot. I mentioned the human literacy as an aspect. So understand machines, but go beyond, focus on what we do. Experiential education is another aspect that gives us an advantage over machines, because experiential education is essentially transferring your knowledge and readapting it from a domain to another. Machines simply don't do that, don't know how to do it. So in this new world, I believe that humans can flourish by constantly rethinking, redefining, reskilling, and re-educating themselves. And higher education is here and should be here to help in this journey. Thank you very much.
Okay, as I said, I asked, and Dr. Aoun referred to this as well, I asked Stan, as one of our economists, to spend a little time discussing his response both to the book and to what Dr. Aoun talked about. So, Stan?
That's right. The expectations have been raised because I'm now supposed to provide accurate predictions about the future, which is very difficult. So I'm going to try and duck that by pretending that I'm forecasting while I'm not actually doing that. I thought this book was very interesting, excellent summary you just gave. Obviously, I'm going to focus on more critical comments because I think that's more fun for everyone involved and makes for a more engaging conversation. So first thing I would say, you hear this very often, right? That people, I think the McKinsey Global Institute has really specialized in this. People predict that half of the jobs in the economy are going to disappear. Usually they give a 20-year timeline, something like that. What happens sort of in the regular workings of the economy is that every month, 4 to 5 million jobs disappear. That's about the number of separations that happen every month. If you do that for a little over a year, you get to half of the jobs in the economy. Right? So I think that's you should think of those numbers in that context. Right? So it's a long timeline, and over a 20-year horizon, 50 million jobs that disappear is really only an additional 5%. Right? So I think that helps you think of how dramatic of a transformation in the labor market we're talking about. Right? So because half of the jobs sounds very frightening, a 5% addition to the regular separations rate, I think, sounds very different. And so I think that's important as we think about this going forward. The second thing I would say is I like your framing about the different cognitive capacities and the 3 types of literacies, but they do suggest that what we are thinking of is sort of a representative worker, right? So the macroeconomists do this a lot, where they think of the economy as there's one guy, and he produces, he consumes, and he saves. And I think in these discussions we often think of education and training and sort of the future workforce in that way, where we're trying to get every worker to know a little bit about various capabilities and various requirements, various skills that the economy will need going further. And so I would, if we can, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you think of that, because I think the way economists think of this, look, there's a set of tasks in the economy that need to be accomplished. Different workers carry out different tasks. Over time, capital can make some of the tasks obsolete. Capital will start carrying out other tasks, and new tasks will be created. At the same time, there are sort of shifts in the productivity levels of various workers and types of capital. But so that creates sort of a broader spectrum of workers and skill requirements. I think thinking of it that way allows you to think of individual workers more than one representative worker. A different way to approach that, and we chatted about this a little beforehand, is to think of there's a few industries that are very large, employ a ton of people. What are those industries going to look like, right? Obviously, the way we're going, about half of the economy is going to be healthcare 20 years from now. What do those people do? Are there going to be fewer? Do we need fewer doctors? Do we need more homemaids because there's a ton of old people? And the homemaid's going to be replaced by robots. Does that mean that we need a ton of homemade robot repairmen? Those kind of questions. I think that's probably more. That's I think a more productive way for policymakers to think about it than to look at one idealized worker who embodies all of the various skills and ways of interacting with machines and robots and teams. And then thirdly, and this is sort of the more skeptical economist view, I think, I like the emphasis on lifelong learning, but when it comes from a university president, it's hard for me not to think the university president wants to expand this market.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 22-year-olds.
I mean, that's what we learn from economists. I mean, you should be happy.
No, for sure. And so those would be my 3 points. But overall, I very much enjoyed the book. I think it gives you a very good framework to to think certainly of the kind of skills that people at especially the high end of the labor market should think about going forward.
Yeah, Stan, thank you very much. This is very good because I'm not an economist. I don't want to be an economist, but at the same time, all these figures about up to 50%, the WHO said up to 70% in the emerging world, 70% of the jobs will disappear. This is what gives you material to write about, you as an economist or another economist, because you differ, you say, look, this is going to be 10%, 5%, 15%, and I projected that. But you are raising, for me, an important point. And the important point is not the numbers, is what kind of talent is needed in the AI world. And we in higher education cannot live on our own and say, this is the kind of talent. What we have done, what we have been doing at, for instance, Northeastern every year is have nationwide surveys. And we surveyed and we talked to CEOs nationwide. We did it with Gallup, we did it with other organizations, but then we also talked directly to CEOs. And personally, I was involved with that. And essentially, this notion of humanics is really trying to capture what the CEOs are telling us. They, for instance, they say that the kind of talent that we need is a talent that understands tech, human-machine interaction. It's not very profound, but also go beyond it. And because ultimately we need to invest in people who have leadership potential. And the humanics is essentially capturing that. So the talent they are looking for is an investment along these lines. Let me give you an example. At some point, there were coding academies, and they still exist. Yeah, and those coding academies were telling people, come, we will train you for 6 weeks, 8 months, whatever it is, and afterwards, we are guaranteeing you a job for $80,000. At the beginning, companies were very excited about that. And they said, we are going to do that. Then they stopped. As a matter of fact, I was discussing that with the CEO of a large company. They have over 350,000 employees, not far from here. And they said, we stopped, we are not going to recruit them anymore. And I said, why? Why is it the case? Said they are good at starting the job, but they don't go further. And when we recruit somebody, we are looking at this person as an investment. So essentially, the companies, the market, and we are here, and we should refer to the market, is telling us the type of talent we need is essentially the humanics talent. So essentially, if you want, what we try to do is capture what people have been telling us. And it's a wake-up call for higher education. You said, we are looking, you're right, we are looking at expanding our market, but we are forced to do that, because if we are not doing that, if we don't move into lifelong learning, other outfits are going to do it. And they have been doing it, whether they are for-profits or not. So yes, we are in a period of a shift. The market is saying, wake up, guys. What are we seeing in the United States? We are seeing that liberal arts colleges are in trouble. That's not good. But they're closing, they're merging, they're being acquired.
Why do you think, so obviously the sort of returns to going to college have, if anything, escalated over the last 30 years or so. So why do you think this is the case? Is it just that we've plateaued in enrollment terms? And that's...
There are two aspects. Where, one is the fact that the number of undergrads is plateauing and dwindling now, the 18 to 22, because we're an aging population. But then there is another aspect here, and Brent, I would like to ask Brent also to add to that, is the fact that liberal arts colleges, also many of them divorce themselves from reality. And therefore, I see from the body language that some agree, some smile, so I don't know. It's
partially the point.
Yeah, but because essentially the young minds are responding to the fact that there is no humanics there. The liberal arts have an enormous role to play if you focus on the human literacy and integrate it with the tech literacy. And you wrote about that.
Yeah, and that's the point I wanted you to expand on, which is, I think Stan and I have seen this. Everybody's seen, hardly a week goes by that we don't see an article in a prominent place saying, a liberal arts degree is really a waste of time. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. People need to focus on skills that they can immediately capitalize on. And so one of the questions you have some prior commitments here. You're a philosopher and a linguist and a neuroscientist. But, why are the arts and humanities practical in the humanics that you're talking about? Because there's a difference between liberal arts and humanics. So I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about that.
There are two aspects. One is that, in the humanics, you have to integrate and understand machines and the products of these machines, tech literacy, data literacy, and focus on the human literacy. And the second aspect with respect to that is that the human literacy is really about humans. So the way in many places the liberal arts have been taught is to focus on theory. I want to talk about Lacan, or I want to talk about Derrida, and I want to talk about this textual analysis. But where is the human literacy aspect of that? So we became, we created a closed environment, and we forgot that the liberal arts originally, in the Renaissance, was there to explain the world and to explain society and to explain humans. So it became a cogitation.
Right. So the president of Northwestern University has written a book on this called Sense and Sensibility, where he talks about applying the wrong kinds of analysis to the field in question. Right. So trying to apply a theoretical or a numeric analysis to text, to the great works of literature, is called spoofing. What they call spoofing, like you're creating a fake science. In the meantime, you're leaving out all of the genuine value of the humanities, which is about how we can learn to understand people through them. So it sounds like that's what you're saying.
Well, first, Morty Shapiro and I worked for 6 years together. Okay. So whatever he says, I have to agree with that.
Northeastern,
No, we were together in Los Angeles. Okay. So he's a close friend, so I agree with him. But the idea is that if you look at the question you raised, what you are focusing on, is that the liberal arts and liberal arts colleges, have an opportunity to get back to the original intent. And in fact, there are attempts. Some of them are trying to, for instance, include and integrate experiential education. Because once you integrate experiential education, it forces you to be in tune with the world. You cannot live for 4 years or 3 years or whatever in a closed environment and cogitate about the theory. And that is happening. And they haven't moved yet into lifelong learning, like many universities, and that's the other opportunity that they have. But they have to rethink their curricula, their business model, and the appeal they have.
Stan, did you have anything?
I wanted to talk a little more specifically about coding and about data analytics. So your book is in the subtitle is artificial intelligence, right? There's a lot of different forms for that. The sort of core general artificial intelligence seems like a technology that would replace exactly skills like coding and data analytics. And so I wanted to just ask how you think of that, because it seemed a little contradictory to me that you would focus a lot of training on exactly the skills that are presumably most easily replaced by technology. So,
you see, that's actually a fine line, and I love the fact that you raised it, Stan, because what I'm saying with the tech literacy and the data literacy, especially with the tech literacy, is understand the human-machine interface. And the human-machine interface is, in fact, changing constantly. So now coding is becoming like typewriting. some of the young people here don't know what a typewriter is. They see it in museums. No one teaches typewriting anymore. And coding in colleges is becoming the same thing. Why? Because people, even at the age of 5, are being introduced to some form of coding through games. And by the time they come, we are seeing that people have it. So going back to your point, the point is to understand how machines work, to understand the human-machine interaction. But and knowing very well that in this situation, what you are learning is going to be obsolete. And even the way in terms of data analytics, the same thing is happening now, because machines are helping you, and you not only crunch data but also make sense of data, and you see the manipulation of data. So what data literacy is allowing you as a learner to understand not only how the data is generated, but what is being manipulated. For instance, I can give you a clear example. Actually, it's an actual example. With respect to, I'll pick on one of our students. Actually, I won't pick. I will brag about her. She studied, going back to your point, when she studied English literary criticism. And she went on co-op, those 6 months internships, to Bosnia. And she realized there that fake news are deadly. It's an internship that was paid by an NGO, and she was there, that fake news are deadly because fake news will tell you, go to this bridge, and this bridge is safe. And in fact, there was a sniper there waiting for you, and the sniper will kill you. So she started a not-for-profit that will allow people to, and warn people about those fake news live. So we asked her, I was very intrigued about that. So I asked her, how did you do it? She said, well, I see the need, I saw the need, and I had to build something to decode fake news immediately. I said, but you are an English major. How did you do that? And she said, it's very simple. I used the tools of literary criticism to apply them to decode fake news. That's the notion of transfer that I mentioned to you that machines do not do. That's experiential education. So what we need to constantly focus on is understand machines and go beyond that, understand what we can do, what they cannot do. And that's fascinating, because it's not done once for all, because as we said, machines are going to be ever more performing.
So we're trying to create machines that can think like us. That's what artificial intelligence, is the ultimate goal, is to have machines that can think like us. We have a reciprocal kind of responsibility to understand how machines think, and be able to understand that when we put information in, this is how it's being processed and handled. That's why people need that literacy that you're talking about, not so that they become like the machines, but so they can understand the limits and the conditions that information is being handled.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a great point, because essentially if the input is biased, the output will be biased. And both the input and the output can be manipulated. And therefore, it behooves us to, as human beings, to understand that.
And the programs, there's been some work done on this recently about the question of the bias of the algorithms. That it's not just the bias of the person putting the information in, making the decision about what goes in, but the bias of the person who designed the algorithm. And increasingly, the problem of, with machine learning, of machines altering their own algorithms, but those biases are still there.
Yeah. And we're going to hear more and more of that.
Yeah.
Because it's relatively, you can kind of oversee the situation as long as someone is explicitly designing the algorithm, right? It's much more black boxy when it's an algorithm that's generated through machine learning. So I think that does seem.
And
how many people use Google and have even the faintest idea of how PageRank works? It's not I know.
And then the added complexity of these algorithms talking to one another.
and learning from one another. So it's once the biases are in, they're very, very difficult to get out, and we have to be aware of them. We have to understand that that's part of the factor.
And you are seeing more and more, the focus on what I call the human-centered AI. And so we were discussing one. You are hearing more and more universities moving into ethical AI, studying ethical AI. Companies are really asking for that. The Googles of this world, etc. And from this perspective, maybe if you allow me, Brent, maybe time to focus on a comparative situation on a global scale. We are, in the United States, the undisputed leader in terms of AI. At the same time, countries like China, for instance, have decided to invest enormously in AI. They are putting $15 billion to create centers for research in AI and training. And also there is research, and that's an example. Russia is doing the same. The European Union is trying to have a national, not a national strategy, or a European strategy for AI. And essentially, if you look at where we are, we cannot take our leadership, our current leadership, for granted. In fact, there is research and there are books being produced saying how you can leapfrog if you start as a second and a third. Where are we today? We need, at this point, at this juncture, we have an opportunity for a moonshot strategy about AI. The same way that, we had, you mentioned in your writings how the GI Bill changed society, how the Sputnik moment also changed our society. And we are in this situation. And what is the purpose of this moonshot strategy? Is to ensure that we have a leadership in AI, but to ensure also that this AI is going to serve humans and to serve society. Let me give you an example. I would not go into the details of this policy, but let me give you an example. All the notion of access that we work on in education and the policymakers have to be rethought, because we think about access as moving from high school to college, and therefore all our policies are geared toward that. Rightly so, but that's not enough. If people are becoming obsolete, then we need a strategy about providing people with access to lifelong learning. Now look at it from a comparative perspective. Singapore and some Scandinavian countries are saying every citizen will have and has a lifelong learning account. And we're giving tax incentives for the citizens to have that. The UK, similarly, they are in Singapore giving incentives for companies to help people have a lifelong learning, to help people exercise the lifelong.
And these are controlled by individuals too.
Controlled by individuals. So that's one aspect. The UK is now dabbling with another opportunity, is to say every company that is of certain size will put half a percentage point of its payroll to retool and help the citizens and the workers and the workforce redefine themselves. We do not have yet a national strategy, a comprehensive, unified national strategy that will ensure, one, that we are maintaining our leadership in AI, and second, that we are providing a human-centered AI, including the one focusing on lifelong learning. That's the opportunity. Which means now, going back to the notion of access, the way we think about access is too limited. Access has to be a lifelong access, and not helping people from the 18 to 22. So what does it mean? Like, for instance, the Pell Grants that are focusing on the 18, could be extended, could be rethought. We have $12 billion that we as a society, as government, are spending on the workforce, on retooling the workforce. But that's not unified. It's going in multiple directions. You know that. And that's our opportunity. Access has to be rethought about as a lifelong access. And policies have to follow.
I'd like to hear Stan respond to the European approach.
Incidentally, he studied in places I know well.
That's right.
Yeah, Tilburg, and you have an affiliation with Utrecht and Madrid.
I teach in Tilburg. Yeah. I went to college in Utrecht.
Yeah, and then Madrid
right.
too.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
All places in Europe. My sense is not that these programs have been super successful so far. I think the typical outcome is still if someone who is 55 years old loses their job, they're going to be unemployed or in some sort of disability program until retirement age. And so I don't actually mind the sort of diversity of programs the US has, right? It creates various options for people. A very different approach, and there's been talk about that in the Netherlands, for example, is to do this through tax credits or vouchers or whatever you want to do, right? Where it's not a government-run system, but you give people some money to do new training later in life. The US has that to some extent, right? There are all kinds of tax benefits that come with paying tuition and things of the kind.
No, but it doesn't. Those benefits do not extend for somebody who is trying to go beyond the 18 to 22, beyond the BABS.
Well, you can still deduct expenses to some extent if you're wealthy enough, if your income, if your household income is high enough.
Yeah,
there's some things. But so you could expand that, make things refundable.
Yeah, but there is no funding. So if you're a mother and your daughter is going to college to study something, we have the Pell Grants, we have grants, and this is wonderful. But if you need to retool, redefine yourself, you have no support for that.
But you do if you take a college class.
But you see, that's the problem.
Isn't that what you would? No, don't you want to restrict it to colleges?
No, because no, not necessarily. Because you see, going back to college, you use the term going back to college. I said people who are lifelong learners don't have the luxury. They may go for a certificate. They don't need necessarily a college. They need to test how to redefine themselves. And we're not providing this opportunity. That's an opportunity. We have to think differently about that. But let me. Why don't you continue about this aspect?
No. I think I've expressed all of the doubts I have. I don't think while lifelong learning sounds nice, but I just don't think there have been super impressive results for people who are over 50. The other thing I would say is that I sometimes worry a little bit.
What you're saying is dangerous.
Well,
Let me tell you why. Because you are providing, especially as a member of the AAI, support for universal basic income. Because you're saying you are doomed beyond the age of 55, and if you're doomed, what do you do? I will give you a universal base income.
That's the role that SSDI plays.
So are you in favor of your universal base income?
No, I would like to come up with better policies.
So let's do it. Let's do it in that case.
I'm just saying I don't think it makes sense to take what we currently do and expand it if it hasn't.
That I agree. I didn't say that. Who said that? Well, Brent, did you say that? Brent, did you say that?
Never say that.
We never say
that.
If you have garbage and unify garbage, it doesn't give you anything but garbage. That's what you're saying.
The other thing that we discussed, what you call experiential learning, I worry a little bit about moving that too close to an apprenticeship type programs.
Oh my God! Look, you are so 19th century when you talk like that.
I'm just saying,
my God!
That's what it's going to look like in reality.
No. You have been trained in a closed environment, and it shows. And it shows. Let me mention. Why don't you finish that? And let me pick on you.
What we see in countries that have a strong tradition of those kind of in Germany and Switzerland, the people who go onto the experiential learning path as opposed to sort of a liberal arts path, they usually they're more likely to be unemployed by the time they're in their 50s. Their incomes are significantly lower by the time they get to that.
They don't do experiential learning. They do vocational training. They do vocational training, and the example, for instance.
What would you say are the key differences between vocational training?
That's I gave you already an example. The example is,
this is the pattern in Europe, right? You get into an apprenticeship program, and you have pretty good youth employment. I mean, you're employed young.
Yeah.
But then you also have higher levels of adult unemployment, isn't that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I worry that experiential learning in reality is going to look like vocational
training. No, we have to educate you about experiential learning. That's clear. Because essentially, first of all...
He needs an internship.
Can it only be learned experientially?
Because you see, let me tell you, I already gave you an example of a difference. Experiential learning is the melding of the classroom experience with the world experience. And you do it whether you are studying engineering, whether you're studying philosophy, or whether you're studying business or chemistry, whatever. And I give you an example of somebody doing English, moving into launching an NGO, to precisely along these lines. That's one aspect. What's the difference? The other difference is that the German and the Swiss system, incidentally, the Europeans are not unified in terms of their approach because, for instance, you don't have the apprenticeship program as developed in, let's say, France or Italy or England, for that matter. But let's go back. The problem with the apprentice, with the vocational education, the apprenticeship system, is that they are focusing on the tech literacy. Whereas, what we are talking about is precisely the humanics, namely, understand human-machine interaction and focus on the human skills. And that's what they don't do. So essentially, the problem that they are facing in Switzerland and Germany is a problem of social mobility. People are stuck, as you said. Why? Because they studied something, and the technology is obsolete, and they cannot move. And they have a real problem there. And you discussed it, you mentioned it. So there is a big difference between experiential education and vocational education from this perspective. Experiential education is, start with the melding of the classroom experience with the world experience. As an economist, for instance, you have to take the knowledge you have and apply it in different domains. That's experiential education. Okay, are you a vocationally trained person? No. Okay, but it's clear that your background was in a closed environment. Anyway.
Okay. Well, this has been very, very interesting dialogue, and we could go on for the next 20 minutes talking, I think, but I think we should give our audience a chance to ask some questions as well. Okay. So as I said, this is being live streamed and recorded. It's very important that you have a mic when you ask a question, and please make it a question. Not a statement. We want you to ask quick questions so that as many people as possible can have the opportunity to get their thought out there and get a response from Dr. Aoun.
If it's difficult, you answer. Both of you.
Yeah. Right here in the center.
So, broad question. What would you all do about kind of like low skill workers, right? Since most of the jobs that are being replaced kind of go on the lower tier end, like retail and kind of like healthcare, so like people who do exams, so on and so forth. Also, as a lawyer and a liberal arts graduate, this conversation has made me feel really great about my life choices.
Who would like to answer?
I think you should.
Okay. Let me give you a kind of, if you allow me, an interesting example. The Bloomberg Foundation has worked with truck drivers because essentially their jobs are on the line. And essentially, the first realization after discussing and working with them and surveying them is that they don't feel that their job is at risk. Okay. Second, they talked to the unions representing them, and the unions felt the same. Now, that doesn't answer your question. Your question is what can be done. What can be done is precisely the opportunity for people to redefine themselves, reskill themselves, and we have to provide it. We, namely society. And you have to do it not precisely by telling them, go back to college. but by providing them the opportunity on demand to have personalized, customized programs. It's interesting that when you look at companies from this perspective, the CEOs are telling us something interesting. And I can quote this one because he authorized me to do it. The CEO of Standard Chartered, who is in the United States. This company is in the bank is in the United States, and the company is also in Asia. And he said, look, and he lives the Singapore model, a brand that we discussed. He said he likes the Singapore model very much. And he said, as an employer, I can help my people, who work for the workforce I have, move into other aspects of finance, namely move them into a fintech, blockchain, whatever it is. But if somebody wants to get out of banking completely and move into entertainment or move into health or whatever, I am not good at that. So somebody has to do it. So that's why I'm saying, first, you need to provide the opportunities, and the opportunities cannot be restricted to the employer, because the employers themselves are telling us it's not the case. And the universities cannot say you can only come if you are seeking a degree or whatever. And frankly, it may have to be done in informal ways too, apart from universities. And this is why the notion that places that Singapore had is to say, I'm giving you an incentive to have a lifelong learning account in order to help you redefine yourselves. And for employers, it's working.
So it feels to me like we're in this transition from lifetime employment to lifetime learning, right?
That's a great point.
So it feels like, and this is, it's not just like in the industrial sector and manufacturing. David Deming at Harvard had this study out last fall saying almost 60% of the STEM workers leave within 10 years. They leave the STEM field and go on. And there's a lot of angst about that, because I was promised a job. I was promised that I would have lifetime employment if I got this degree. How do we communicate effectively to people their end of the responsibility on this, right? It's not just what government is going to do or employers are going to do. We as workers have to take this idea of constant learning and retooling seriously. How do you get that across to?
It has to start very early on, very early on. For instance, this is, and I don't have the final word on that. I have the final word on nothing. But we are being approached now by, and it started like 5-6 years ago, by K through 12 colleges and schools and school systems nationwide. And they're telling us, please come and let us, and help us have experiential education. And so we organize these workshops every year, for the K through 12 principals, heads of systems, of private schools, public schools, etc. And we ask them why. Why are you interested? Because they said through experiential education, the students learn what they like, what they don't like. They learn that what they are good at, what they are not good at, and they learn also how to modify their behavior and the learning, the opportunities that they face. And we said, but you haven't seen it in high school. He said, yes, but we see it in college through experiential education. That's another bonus for that. And so people have, you cannot tell people you have to change. People have to live it. And experiential education is a way to let you do that. Look, you and I, if I can allow myself to have had this brief discussion before about your own journey. Your own journey is an example of an experiential education. Right. But you are, you are thriving through that, and the question is.
I'm constantly reinventing reinventing myself.
Yeah,
Yes, that's right.
yeah, that's what, and we all need to do it, and it's hard.
Very
It's
smart
hard.
way to gain his sympathy.
Yeah, it's hard. I already gained it before coming. Otherwise, I won't be here.
I'm not like an economist locked in my own ecosphere of activity.
I love that. Now I have nothing to say anymore. It's between the two of you.
Yeah, can I quickly say? So, I think a more you can say a bunch of pre-optimistic things about sort of relatively low-skilled workers too, I think. One is that basically no one is unemployed currently. Second, unlike the last time we went through this kind of massive transformation when basically agricultural employment completely disappeared, everyone lives in cities now, roughly speaking, and there are much more diversified economies. If your job disappears, there's a lot of other opportunities in a way that that wasn't true if you were a farmhand in 1870. And then thirdly, I think we sometimes overestimate the share of the population that was in these very steady lifelong jobs in 1950. Those jobs certainly existed, but that there were a lot of people who had pretty tenuous connections to the workforce, who had jobs on and off. It's always weird to me that people hold the following two thoughts in their heads at the same time. One, that everyone used to have lifelong employment, and that's no longer the case. But at the same time, we used to have a much more dynamic economy with more entrepreneurship, and that's gone now. It's not hard. It's hard to have those two ideas in your head at the same time.
It's hard, but not impossible.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Lots of people have those too.
I think we've got a question over here. Yeah.
Thanks, Ed Hudgens at the Heartland Institute. My question concerns the institutions of higher education and the adverse incentives that they have right now to keep the current system going. As you know, you have a problem where loan guarantees essentially seduce young people to go into four-year colleges where they often get those degrees we talked about that are completely detached from reality and certainly from the job market. And, of course, the values that they're being taught and a lot of the information passed along is certainly not entrepreneurial. Otherwise, why would we have two generations after Bill Clinton, people actually taking Bernie Sanders seriously? So it seems like this is possibly a way to get around that institutional problem where if universities see let's everybody go to college 18 to 21, which is not necessarily a good idea, well, we can provide this lifelong learning, then maybe that's a way to break the institutional problems of universities where you see real costs going up incredibly compared to everything else in the economy and really bad anti-free market, anti-entrepreneurial values being passed along and indoctrinated into the kids.
I think we have, there's a question there for you and one for Stan too, I think, about the market in higher education.
Well, I think the value of a college degree, if anything, has grown over the past generations. I certainly don't share the general skepticism. There's definitely people who end up with lots of student loans. It's often people who don't finish their degrees or people who do expensive graduate programs that often do pay off. But you have a large loan balance for a while if you go to an expensive medical school. So I'm not as concerned, I think, as you seem to be about that. As to Bernie Sanders, I don't know. We had a pretty big financial crisis. I think that a pretty deep recession afterwards. I think that those are more important drivers of support for politicians like him, which appears to be fading, by the way, than cultural values imbued by the system of higher education that we have.
Dr. Aoun, do you want to respond?
So what part do you want me to respond to? Which part? Which aspect? No, I'm serious here. Could you use the mic because we're online?
Perhaps the university and colleges taking on a new role in lifelong learning so they're not detached from reality.
Yeah.
And getting around the problem that right now the real costs are going up incredibly compared to just about everything else in the economy.
So there are two separate points that you're raising. One is that, in fact, how do universities be in tune with reality? And I volunteer two points. One is experiential education is forcing you to be in tune with reality. So for instance, at Northeastern, our students go on co-ops, long-term internship for 6 months. We have 3,000 companies working with us and NGOs. The day we are not in tune with the needs of these companies have to recruit the students and they have to pay them. If the day we're not in tune with the reality, they don't get those co-ops. That's one thing. The other thing about the lifelong learning is we are seeing that when universities move into lifelong learning, there is a pressure on pricing. Why? Because precisely, it's a new domain, there is competition, there is no support, it's to your point. And also it forces universities to be in tune with reality. So experiential education, by definition, will force you to be in tune there, and lifelong learning. Peter.
Over here.
I'm with the IBM Corporation, and I think many of us in the business community find what you're talking about is very positive, and we're looking for additional ways of working with you. One of the ideas that Northeastern was instrumental on was the experimental sites around the federal work study, and on the assumption that that was a great idea and that you have 2 other ideas out there that you haven't shared with the business community yet, what are the 2 other things you would have us work on in addition to the FWS?
That's a plug for IBM, because we're working with IBM. It's not a plug from you, but it's plug coming from you, but from me. You guys at IBM, we're working with you, and we have done it. You have small micro certificates called badges. You have 5,000 of them. Now, we in higher education, our approach is to be protectionist.
Why do you call them micro certificates?
Namely, very small certificates, very small. I didn't call them nano.
Small, or
do you want me to explain the difference between nano and micro?
No,
I'm joking. I'm playing because they are short duration for very specific, etc. So you have done those 5,000 badges, and those badges are terrific. We studied every one of them, and we built an articulation agreement with IBM in such a way that all the people who have had those badges can continue and with another certificate with us all the way to the degree, to the master's. So that's an opportunity, but that meant that we in higher education, at Northeastern, sat down with you and said, we don't have the monopoly of the curriculum. So that was a learning experience. Similarly, you mentioned the other aspect, where we embedded advanced nanomanufacturing. You don't want me to explain that. No. Advanced nanomanufacturing and advanced manufacturing in GE for their employees. And we worked with them before that on what kind of outcomes they want, and the delivery is there. So there are many ways of looking at lifelong learning in an extramural way. Don't focus on that aspect. And we're working with you currently, with IBM, on trying to look at how what you are doing in machine learning and what we are working on in the coaching apps that will remain with this learner for life, that we combine that. So we are in a kind of, going back to your point, that we launched an app that I think we are unique in this respect. No other institution has done it. That will stay with you for life. It's that whether you are an undergraduate student or a learner, and this app will help you determine your learning objectives and where to find them, and will help you determine also where the experiential opportunities are. And we're working with you precisely with Watson on trying to see how Watson and what our app, it's called SAIL, can mesh together and work along these lines. So that's a fascinating opportunity too, because the learner now is not supported in, if she wants to go and redefine herself, where is she going to do it? So that will be a universal tool that we have. Those are some of the examples, Peter.
I think this gentleman had his hand up.
Fascinating discussion. Dr. Aoun, your book, which I've already read, makes clear that
the future for employment is going to be very unlike the past. And yet I think you also mentioned the importance of having a liberal arts education because that's how you become a well-rounded person. So the question is, for this young lady who is about to graduate with a degree in comparative French literature, which is probably not going to get her the job she wants, and at the same time, kids going out into the world today need to know about robotics and artificial intelligence and all of these things where the new employment's going to be. What should university curricula look like today that they didn't look like 10 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, it's the integration that I mentioned. It's a humanics. The humanics is key. Namely, you don't teach only the tech literacy, you don't teach only the data literacy in the silos and the human literacy, you combine them. Let me give you an example. The example, for instance, take computer science. You know, takes the study of cybersecurity. That's even an easier example. When you're looking at cybersecurity, if you look, you have to look at it not only from the technical point of view, but also from the impact on society and humans. So our programs have to include, and in fact they do, the notion of privacy, have to include, you know, the legal implications, etc. So if you, the notion is that you have to break down the silos that exist in higher education. And that's the beauty of that, and that's the opportunity. And let me give you another example. It was, you know, all our computer science students have to go to have an improv class, improvisation. And the Wall Street actually had in the front page something along these lines, a study on us. You read it, Peter, I think. Okay, and why? Why did we do that? Because essentially, at the beginning, the students said, well, why are we wasting our time with that? But then the point was very simple. Those people, you know, are going to interact with other people through improv. If I can make you laugh or cry or dance with me, then I am going to be forced to understand you. And that's essentially the integration. That's humanics in action. Humanics is not go study in one course tech, in another course data, and a third course human literacy. In everything you do, you have to integrate them. Otherwise, you become schizophrenic.
Well, that was very well timed because we are exactly at 11:45. Thank you so much, Dr. Aoun,
Thank
for
you,
being
Brent.
with us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you.
And thank you all for being with us this morning, and keep watching. This topic is going to continue to be something we look at here at AEI.